Isle of Skye looks like the perfect fairy tale road trip through the Scottish Highlands, but this day was anything but perfect. In this Scotland travel vlog, I'll show you what one full day on the Isle of Skye actually looks like. From old Man of Storr and the hidden waterfalls we never planned to see, to Elian Donan Castle, Loch Ness, and the mistakes that nearly derailed the entire itinerary. Our fourth day in Scotland, and second on the Isle of Skye, started in Portree, and for the first time on this entire Scotland road trip, we woke up without an early ferry, a long morning drive, or that stressful feeling of needing to rush. After a short walk through the peaceful morning atmosphere and filming the colorful Portree harbour in a completely different light than the lively evening version from the previous episode, we had a traditional breakfast by paying €35 for two at Café Arriba, before capturing a quick drone shot from the terrace near Portree Gathering Hall. That quiet morning version of Portree made it one of the most unforgettable stops of our journey, and honestly, the calm before one of the fullest days of this Isle of Skye travel guide. After around 20 minutes of driving, we reached Old Man of Storr and paid €7 for parking. The weather was lightly rainy, the ground slippery, and the wind kept changing, sometimes calm, sometimes strong enough to remind you that this is the Scottish Highlands, not a controlled travel experience. Friends who had just been here had warned me about the rain, the freezing wind, and the difficulty of the hike, but honestly, I had not taken those warnings seriously enough. Standing there questioning whether we should even climb, my brother looked at me and said, "We may only see a view like this once in our lives." That was all I needed. During the hike, we saw people of all ages completing the trail or at least reaching the most iconic viewpoint, and that gave us confidence. Old Man of Storr is believed to take its name from the legend of a giant who lived in a cave nearby and turned to stone after death, and when you finally see that landscape with your own eyes, you understand why it is one of the most iconic views in Scotland. We completed the hike in exactly 2 hours, and although the weather made it more challenging, I can honestly say it was not as impossible as it may look online. With proper shoes, enough time, and respect for the conditions, this is one of the biggest wins of any Isle of Skye road trip. After returning to the car, we drove just 10 minutes to Lealt Falls, where parking was completely free, and this stop surprised me in the best possible way. Walking along the wooden viewing platform, watching the main waterfall and smaller streams cascade through a wooded canyon before reaching the sea, it felt peaceful, photogenic, and still wild enough to be a real Scottish Highlands moment, so I did a short drone flight from a quiet area. From Lealt Falls, we drove another 7 or 8 minutes to Kilt Rock waterfall, paid €4 for parking, and this became one of the first disappointments of the day. I had imagined capturing dramatic drone footage here since the beginning of the trip, but the sign clearly stated drone flying was banned from February to July because of cliff nesting birds, and when nature is involved, there is nothing to argue about. From the viewing terrace, the waterfall itself was not as impressive as I expected, though the coastal cliffs and ocean views still made it worth a short stop. As we continued towards the northern side of the island, the landscape became more rural, greener, and more dramatic, while Quiraing, another one of Skye's famous hikes, appeared on our left. Many describe Quiraing as easier than Old Man of Storr, but with our schedule already extremely full and 2 hikes in one day nearly impossible, we made the difficult decision to skip it. That moment taught us one of the biggest lessons of this trip. To truly experience the Isle of Skye, you need at least 3 days, not one packed itinerary. We then reached Duntulm Castle, parked by the roadside, and walked 5 minutes through postcard-like green hills, open farmland, and dramatic coastal scenery. The castle itself was nothing more than ruined stone walls with paths covered in animal tracks, but the window-like opening facing the ocean, framing a small island in the distance, made the whole detour meaningful. In all that emptiness, isolation, and decay, there was a strange beauty that felt completely different from the more famous stops in a typical Isle of Skye travel guide. Only 6 minutes after Duntulm Castle, we passed the Skye Museum of Island Life, a place I had read about with unique examples of traditional island living, but time forced us to keep going. From there, we drove about 17 minutes to Rha Waterfalls, parked for free, and this was not even part of our original plan. It was one of those let's stop and see decisions that you make during a road trip, and it became one of the biggest wins of this entire Scotland travel vlog. After just 2 or 3 minutes of walking, we entered Uig Woodland Walk, surrounded by huge trees and beautiful natural scenery, and a few minutes later we heard the sound first, then saw Rha Waterfalls flowing through the greenery right in front of us. After that, hunger finally hit us hard, so we drove just 3 minutes to the Galley Cafe and takeaway for a delicious scampi and fish and chips meal, our last on the Isle of Skye, before filling the fuel tank in Portree and leaving the island behind. After leaving Portree, we drove about 45 minutes and crossed Skye Bridge, the only bridge connecting the Isle of Skye to the Scottish mainland. There was a little sadness in leaving Skye behind, but also excitement, because the next chapter of this Scotland road trip was beginning. About 15 minutes later, we arrived at Elian Donan Castle, one of the most famous castles in Scotland, dating back to the 13th century, built against Viking attacks, and known from films like Highlander and James Bond. But this was where we faced one of the biggest disappointments of the day. Because of a private event, the castle had closed earlier than usual, and even though we had paid €4 for parking, we could not go inside. Maybe it was partly bad luck, but honestly, it was also our planning mistake. We tried to fit too much into one day, arrived too late, and ended up seeing Eilean Donan Castle only from the outside. This is exactly why this episode is not just an Isle of Skye travel guide. It is a real Scotland reality check. After the disappointment at Eilean Donan, we started the long drive towards Loch Ness. The route was beautiful green landscapes, forested roads through the Highlands, and we stopped briefly at Glen for coffee and at Drumnadrochit Dam for a quick drone flight. Soon after, we reached the Loch Ness area, but we still had not realized the big mistake waiting for us. We drove through Fort Augustus, crossed to the other side of the lake, past grazing animals and wild deer, and then suddenly realized that in the navigation, we had selected Loch Ness itself instead of the hotel address. By the time we noticed, it was already too late. Maybe it was tiredness, maybe distraction after a long day, but this mistake cost us almost 1.5 hours. At that point, the time we should have used for rest was gone. We were hungry, and knowing we still had another long drive ahead made it feel even worse. Finally, we arrived in Drumnadrochit and checked into the Glen bed and breakfast, which I had booked through Airbnb. The normal price was €103, but because I am also an Airbnb host and had earned a Superhost coupon, I paid just €3 for this stay. After dropping our bags, we went straight to Fiddler's Highland restaurant for a much-needed burger and fish and chips before ending this exhausting but unforgettable day. For 2 people, our actual out-of-pocket spending for this day came to around €240, though that number only worked because of a lucky Airbnb Superhost coupon that covered almost the entire accommodation. Without it, a normal traveler doing this same Isle of Skye road trip should realistically budget around €340 for 2 people once you factor in fuel, parking at Old Man of Storr and Kilt Rock, meals throughout the day, and the full accommodation cost. If you are trying to experience the Isle of Skye and Loch Ness on a lower budget, the smartest strategy is to focus on the free stops Lealt Falls, Duntulm Castle, and Rha Waterfalls cost nothing. Bring supermarket food for at least one meal, reduce cafe stops, and always check opening hours before arriving so you do not waste fuel, time, and energy on a closed castle like we did. So, was this long and exhausting road trip worth it? Honestly, yes, but not because everything went perfectly. It was worth it because the Isle of Skye gave us some of the most powerful landscapes of this entire Scotland travel series. The morning calm of Portree Harbour, the dramatic climb at Old Man of Storr, the surprise beauty of Rha Waterfalls that was never even in the plan, the abandoned atmosphere of Duntulm Castle, and even the frustrating lessons at Elian Donan Castle and Loch Ness that taught us to slow down and respect the reality of the Scottish Highlands. This was not a perfect travel day, but it was a real one, and sometimes those are the journeys you remember the most. Now I want to ask you, would you try to see the Isle of Skye in 2 days like we did? Or would you give it at least 3 days and travel more slowly? Write your answer in the comments, I'd love to know. And if this video helped you plan your own Scotland road trip, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. All the hotel, car rental and reservation links you need are in the description below.